Hello everyone, and welcome to Living Coast in your living room. My name is Ashley, and I'm one of the educators here at the Living Coast Discovery Center. Now, the Living Coast Discovery Center is a small nonprofit zoo and aquarium located down in Chula Vista. We are uniquely situated on the San Diego Bay National Wildlife Refuge. So when all this is over and you have a chance to come visit us, be sure to come say hi to myself and all of our native animal friends here. We'd love to see you guys. But until then, be sure to join us every single day here on Facebook Live for all kinds of different interactive opportunities to learn about our native animals that call the Living Coast Discovery Center their home. Now today, we are actually going to be focusing on fish, but I have some questions for you guys, so we're actually going to do this in a little trivia-based style. All you have to do is comment your answers and let me know what you think. What's in the answers to my questions? So today's focus is all about fish. So behind me, we have some different tropical fish that we're getting a chance to see swim around as we learn about fish and I ask you some questions. Are you guys ready to get started? Great. So my first question for you is going to be, what makes a fish a fish? How do you know a fish from a different animal that lives in the ocean? How can you tell these animals apart? What do you guys think? Well, scientists have actually decided on two different characteristics that all fish have in common. The first one is going to be that they all have a backbone or a spinal column. Does that sound familiar to you? That's right. All fish are going to be vertebrates. Just like we are, we have a spinal column that helps give us our shape and our support. Fish also have a spinal column or vertebra to help give them their shape or their structure as well. Now, does that mean they all look the same? No, different vertebrae are going to be made out of different materials. So some fish have a bony spinal column, just like we do, while some fish have a cartilaginous one. Do you guys know which fish I'm talking about? What animal do you know of that has no bones in its body, or hard calcified bones, I really should say, but we see them all the time and the media loves to show them. We got to see them last week as well. That's right, sharks. Think of a shark. A shark has a backbone, but it is not made out of the same bony material that our skeleton is made out of. It is different, it's cartilage. Now, there's another characteristic. So we said two at the beginning. First is going to be spinal column, or backbone. And the second is actually going to be what? What do you guys think? Where do you most commonly find a fish? That's right, in water. All fish have to live in water. Now, do they all live in the same area? No, they don't. Some fish live in water in the ocean, while some live in fresh water. And in between those two different types, we can actually live in all kinds of different habitats found underneath that water column. So they could live in a coral reef, such as these fish behind me. These are tropical fish, so they would live in a coral area. They could also live in things like a kelp forest, like we have off of our California coastlines. But some fish live in things like lakes, in rivers, in streams. The earth is covered in over 70% of water. That's crazy. I said that weird. Earth is 70% water, and that is why fish are going to be found in so many diverse and different habitats. Now, knowing that there's so many different places for these fish to live, how many do you think there are? How many types of fish can we find in the ocean or in the water, in the rivers and lakes? So how many different species of fish do you think they are? Go ahead and comment those answers below. I'd love to hear from you guys and see what you guys think about these different animals. So this number is really high, so I want you guys to think about it and take a second and probably double or triple whatever number you're thinking of. Are you ready to find out the answer? There are over 30,000 different species of fish that have been recorded by scientists. Fish are such a diverse group of animals. Yeah, that's insane. 30,000. That's crazy. Now, the reason why there's so many different types of fish is because of all those different habitat spaces, but because fish have been on the earth for over 500 million years. Our fossil records have shown we've seen fish being in different parts of the ocean, different parts of lakes and rivers, in different areas for over 500 million years. And that's why we have so many different species of fish available out there on our planet now. Now, earlier we were talking about those two characteristics, living in water and having a backbone, but I'm sure you thought of some other characteristics that you thought maybe made up a fish. Go ahead and comment those below. What kind of characteristics did you originally think are going to group all fish together? Now, some of those commonly thought of characteristics are going to be things like laying eggs, having gills, and having scales on their bodies. Now, there are fish that do all of these things, but not every fish is going to be following those characteristics. So those are common characteristics, but they're not going to be across the board for all 30,000 different types of fish. So that is why they're not considered within that characteristic grouping. Now, those characteristics, like breathing with gills, are going to be something you encounter very often, as these fish behind me, they breathe with gills. But there are fish, such as the mud skipper, that is going to actually be able to gulp air. So they'll go up to the surface and gulp air. And they also are going to be found around muddy areas when the tide washes out, and they can be left on that shoreline. Those are going to be where they're going to get that air source from. As for laying eggs, do you guys know of any shark or fish that is going to give live birth? If you caught on with us last week when we talked about shark trivia, we did discuss how different sharks can lay eggs, but some give live birth. Do you remember what I told you? Great white sharks are an example of that. They can give live birth, and so can whale sharks. Those also give live birth. So not all fish are going to have to lay eggs. A lot of them do, but not all of them have to. Now, the last characteristic that a lot of people think of traditionally as being something that all fish have is going to be scales. Can you think of a fish that doesn't have any scales? This one's pretty hard. I'd be super impressed if you could tell me a fish that doesn't have any scales. What you want to think of is going to be things like hagfish and lampreys. Those kinds of fish have different skin structures, and so that's why they don't have those scales. Now, those characteristics that we just went over, those are 5 very common ones. So backbones, living in water, scales, eggs, gills, those are all going to be things that people mostly think of when they have a fish. However, those 5 characteristics are actually going to be more commonly referred to for one specific grouping of fish. Did you know there are different groupings of fish? How many groups of fish do you think there are? So we have our big overall umbrella of fish, and then it branches into different types of groups. What kinds of groups do you think are going to be in there? Go ahead and guess with a number. How many groups of fish do you think exist? Well, if you guessed 3, that is correct. We have the bony fish, which is what's behind me here. We have our cartilaginous fish, which are going to be things like sharks and rays and skates. And the third group is actually called the jawless fishes. So jawless fish are going to be things like those hagfish and lampreys that I talked about just a few moments ago. Yeah, I'd be super impressed if you could name all 3 of those previously before this video. Now, who do you think is going to be the biggest or the largest fish out there? Which one is going to be the largest in length? Go ahead and guess it in the comments. Well, if you guessed whale shark, that is correct. Whale sharks can get all the way up to 60 feet. That's longer than a school bus. So whale sharks are very large, but are all fish that big? No, they're not. The smallest fish ever recorded is actually less than ½ of an inch. So fish can vary in sizing all the way from less than ½ of an inch to 60 feet in length, 2 opposite ends of the spectrum. That's crazy difference in sizing. All right, so now that we have gone over those characteristics of a fish, we're going to play a game here. We're going to practice. I'm going to hold up a animal, and you're going to tell me whether it is a fish or not a fish. What do you guys think? So remember, those two characteristics are going to be that they have a backbone or vertebra, and two, that they live in water. Doesn't matter if it's ocean water or fresh water, but they do need to live in water. All right, let's go ahead and get started. All right, what do you guys think? Is this a fish? That's right, this is going to be a fish. This is a royal blue tang, very commonly seen in Finding Nemo and Finding Dory. People often refer to these as dory fish, but their names are regal blue tangs or royal blue tangs. And they are great tropical fish, very pretty and vibrant blue. How about this one? What do you guys think? Is this a fish? Now this one is not a fish. So if you guessed not a fish, you are correct. This is called a sea star. Sea stars do not have backbones, so they are not a fish. They used to call them starfish. Some people still do. But the scientific community has actually switched from using that term into referring to them as sea stars. All right, guys, time for another one. What do you think? Is this a fish? So just like our sea star, this is not a fish. It does not have a backbone. This is an octopus. Octopus are invertebrates, so therefore they can't be a fish. All right, how about this one? Is this a fish? So it might be a little hard to tell. Let's check out its face. This is, in fact, a fish. This is a shark. Sharks are going to belong in that cartilaginous fish grouping, so they are a fish. All right, this one's a tricky one. What do you guys think? Is this a fish? Now, often people don't know, and they get really confused on this one. What do you think it might be? Is this a fish or not a fish? This is an eel. Eels are in fact fish. They do have a backbone and they breathe with gills and they live in the ocean. They also have scales, so they actually fit within that bony fish category. So they are a fish. What about this one? Now, if you tuned in last week, we did learn about this animal. This was the star of our crustacean video. What do you guys think? Are crabs a fish or not a fish? That's right, they are not a fish. Also an invertebrate. No backbone on a crab. How about this one? Is this a fish? You got it. This is a sailfin fish. So it says fish in the name, but just like we learned earlier, just because it has fish in the name does not mean it is in fact a fish. But sailfin fish are fish. They have backbones and they live in the ocean. Now this one is commonly referred to as a fish. I've heard lots of people call it a fish. What do you guys think? Is this a fish? No, that's right. This is a killer whale. That is in fact a mammal. They breathe air with lungs. They don't have scales, but they do have a backbone and live in the water. But they don't have any of those other characteristics that would make a fish a fish. So a good tricky one here, but killer whales are not a fish. How about this one? Is this a fish? This is a fish. This is a clownfish. Clownfish have a backbone and they live in the ocean. And they also are going to be found living in what kind of habitat? Do you know? They live in sea anemones. Good job. All right, let's do one more. How about this one? Is this a fish? Now this is a jelly, also known as a sea jelly or a jellyfish. But if you joined in last week as well, you learned that this is not a fish. Jellies are invertebrates, so they do not have a backbone. Awesome. Well, I hope you enjoyed playing our game and you learned about fish and you got to practice identifying whether something is a fish or not. So remember, fish are going to be broken up into 3 different groupings, and within those 3 different groups, they do have lots of different common characteristics shared between them. But what makes a fish actually relies on 2 different characteristics. They have a backbone and they live in water. Common things we think of as fish are going to be things that include having scales, having gills, and laying eggs, as many different fish do this. But not all fish have to do that. Now I hope you had a great time learning about fish with us here today, and we'll hope to see you next time on Living Coast in Your Living Room. See you next time.